Welcome to another episode of Called to Serve, where we profile the lives of people whom God has called to serve the church. And on today's episode, we're very blessed to have our first sister on our program. She's a sister of St. Joseph from North Bay. She is Sister Costanza Romano. Sister, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
You are the first sister we have on this program, so you must feel blessed today.
Oh, I am, very much so. I'm blessed as a sister, so this is an extra little piece.
It's so true. So people don't know this at home, but I met you way before you were a sister and way before I was a priest.
That's right. We've been on each other for a few years.
That's right. Yeah. There was like a youth conference in Sault Ste. Marie that you hosted us at.
Yes.
Right? So that was a good...
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So it was nice to meet with you again later in your ministry.
Yes.
So tell us right now, with this pandemic happening, what's life like at the Mother House, where the Sisters of St. Joseph live? What's life like there right now?
Well, it's very different because usually we have this open door policy because one of our part of our charism is hospitality, and so we are so used to having people coming in, and we have tenants who come in. And during this pandemic, of course, a lot of that has stopped. And so it's been a difficult time because we miss those interactions with different people. But hopefully at some point we can get to that stage where we can open up our doors again and have that flow happening again. With our sisters, some of them have compromised health, so we need to be very cautious about all that. But we do miss that hospitality factor, which is so ingrained in us as part of our charism.
Yeah, and the sisters do hospitality like the best. Every time I go there, they're so gracious to me, and they feed me well too.
We are very fortunate, and the thing is that we love it. I mean, we love having people here, and we love interacting and seeing new faces, and especially when we have children come in, it's such a joy for the sisters to experience the young ones. Or when we have from the schools, when we have retreats here, and we host retreats for students, we love that energy that comes with people. And of course, meeting in person, even just committee meetings, are so different doing them on Zoom than being in person where the energy is very real. So we do miss all those different pieces.
For sure. And we were talking about before we started recording our interview that we haven't seen each other in a while. It's much different to talk in this way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your own journey. So I know you're from Sault Ste. Marie. And you were kind of a later vocation, right?
I was, yes.
Yeah, so tell us about your early life before you became a Sister of St. Joseph.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie. My family from there, my parents are immigrants, and they met and married and lived in Sault Ste. Marie all my life. So at no point in my early life did I ever consider religious life as a vocation for me. I always thought, either married life or single life. I had never really pursued the thought of religious life. So in my late 30s, I was in prayer, and I remember God speaking to me very clearly about, it would be lovely, be a sister. I think that's where you're called. And I remember saying, God, stop messing with me. Don't be joking with me. That's not where I'm headed. And yet, in God's soft whispers, because God is not a bull in the china shop by any stretch. It was an insistent call, and so I felt I needed to explore that. But again, that was not till my late 30s. So I did not enter until 2006, January 7th. Actually, the Feast of the Epiphany is when I entered the sisters, and there was a 2-year process before that. So again, I was late 30s, early 40s before I took any form of doing any of that. I worked in a family business. I was a teacher. I did a variety of things. And so I was living a good life. I mean, I was enjoying myself. I had my own house. But, when God calls, it just touched my heart. And I knew that I had to explore it and look at it. And needless to say, here I am. If you had told me 30 years ago that I would be here, I would have told you were a little crazy, but here I am. So
Well,
Yeah.
thank be to God you answered the call to serve because you've done great things in your ministry. Your faith life before, obviously, to hear God calling you to serve as a sister, you must have been someone who practiced their faith regularly. What was that? What was your experience of faith before to lead you to hear God calling you in your life?
Well, I was born and raised Catholic. I went to the same church I was baptized in for years. There was a short period of time where I did leave the church because I just wasn't being filled by it, and so I did explore other faith traditions. But I remember driving by the church one night and saying, "You know what? I'm being called back to this. I love the Catholic faith. It's a rich faith. Um, but I love the New Testament. I love the Jesus." And so I was being called back to church. And then I went and I jumped in with both feet. I ended up being a ministry leader. I ended up on parish council. But I was starting to be filled again. And so my prayer life continued and it just kept growing. I continued with retreats, with spiritual direction, which has always been a very important part of my life. And so it seemed to be like a natural progression as the time went.
That's great. Tell us a little bit for people who don't know. In 2006, when you entered the Sisters of St. Joseph, what is that process like? Like, how does someone begin to start that process of becoming a sister?
So what happened is when I heard the call, the first thing I did was spoke with my spiritual director. That was essential to sort of do a real discernment process and ensure that this is exactly where God was calling me. So then once that was done, I spoke with our vocation ministry. So at that time, it was Sister Pat Carter and Sister Mary Jo Rady. And so then I entered into a full discernment candidacy period where I discerned what it was that God was calling me to. Was I a fit for this congregation? And so we did. Basically, we met, and I met some of the sisters of the congregation. I came to North Bay. I did retreats. So I worked on all that for 2 years with Sister Mary Jo and Sister Pat. And then, of course, after that, then I wrote our general superior and asked, for permission to enter. And that happened in 2006. So again, it was a 2-year process of discernment to really look at fit and if this was really where God was calling me, or was God calling me to ministry, but in a different form. And it ended up that this was my call. And so in 2006, picked up, moved to North Bay to our mother house, and entered and started my novitiate.
And that process takes about how long between the time you enter and the time you make perpetual or final vows?
Okay. So I entered in 2006, and it's a 2-year novitiate. So what I did through that novitiate process was, first off, there was a period where I was studying and learning about the congregation, learning church history, learning these different pieces. But I also did ministry. So that's called apostolic. And so I worked in different ministries. So I undertook pastoral care. I worked with Sister Sarah at CHCO, which is the Catholic Health Corporation. I assisted at family enrichment. So I carried on some different ministries and I studied. So that's what the first 2 years looks like. And then after that, I went into a ministry. So at that time, I entered into the ministry of full-time pastoral care. And I got education. I received some CPE units at St. Mike's Hospital. And then in 2008, the long weekend of May of 2008, I made temporary vows. And again, during this whole time, I'm in ministry, I'm working, I'm in congregational settings, I'm in meetings, and all those different pieces. And then there's a period of discernment to say, okay, do I now want to make perpetual vows? So my perpetual vows took place in 2011 in August. And again, there's this period of discernment saying, am I ready to take that step of permanent, perpetual vows? Because up until that time and in temporary vows, I'm still free to leave the congregation and I'm still free to go back to my life in another way, shape, or form. But once you take perpetual vows, I mean, that is a 100% commitment to our vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. And so, you want to make sure. So you discern. I went on retreats, spoke with my spiritual director. So in 2011, I said, yes, this is the life that I want. This is my vocation. And that's what happened.
It's beautiful. Tell us about the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience that you take, because the sisters live in community.
Yes.
They're a congregation, and in the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie, they have their own congregation, the Sisters of Sault Ste. Marie. So tell us about those vows that you take, as brief as you can, I guess, and what they mean to the life of a sister.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the vow of poverty, because that's the one that seems to be the most misunderstood, and the one that seems to really sort of set people on edge. Even when I speak to students, it's the vow of poverty that really catches them, because they don't fully understand what that means. My taking a vow of poverty doesn't mean that I live poor. What it means is that I acknowledge that everything that I have, everything that I am, is part of a community. So any money I earned when I was working, that went into a community pot, and it helps support all our ministries, care for our sisters, and yet it also means that I am very cautious about money that I spend. I don't spend stuff whimsically. I don't go out and buy a hybrid car. I don't go out and buy, $1,000 dress or anything like that. I'm very cautious of what I spend and how I spend it. So it's not that I live poorly by any stretch of the imagination. I am blessed in all that I have, but it's community. It's all about community. None of it is mine. My vehicle is not mine. It's community. So that's the vow of poverty. The vow of chastity means that my life is dedicated to a relationship with God and with my community. And so it's like being the bride of Christ, and you work in that relationship and make it function in that relationship. The vow of obedience, again, it's a vow to where is God calling me in all of this? And it's a vow of obedience to a community, recognizing that this is not just my life anymore. It is about the other sisters that are part of this. It's about our ministries. It's about being together. So when the General Superior comes to me and says, I'd like you to consider this ministry, it's for me to really discern and say, is this where God is calling me? And we work together to make that discernment. It's not a command. It's where is God calling me? So those are the three vows that we take.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So speaking of community of the Sisters of St. Joseph, can you tell us a little bit about their history? So they were started in the 17th century.
Right.
They came to Canada around 1850, I guess. And I guess the congregation officially started in our diocese in 1936.
Right.
But for me, growing up, the sisters were kind of everywhere. They were in the schools teaching. They were running the hospitals. Like, their ministry has blessed our entire diocese, our province. I mean, the Sisters of St. Joseph arguably started the education system and healthcare system that we have here today, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the service of the Sisters of St. Joseph over its history, I guess, maybe in our own local diocese.
So, I mean, we did start in 1650 in France, and our whole call was to serve people. And so that's always been our ministry. And our ministry has always been, where is there a need? So certainly when there was time, we started schools, we started hospitals. There was a time when sisters would operate and care for people on their dining room table because there was no setting for them to do that. And as the years progress, we see those changes in ministry. I mean, we've ministered in the Bahamas, in Africa, in Guatemala, in various places. But now we're called to a different ministry. And now we're called to say, what are the needs in our regions? And so a lot of our ministry right now is in vocation animation, in trying to nurture faith. It is also to serve our seniors. So Here at the Mother House, we have seniors' apartments so that we can minister to that. But we have sisters who are part of the Cancer Society, who are part of the Alzheimer's. We go into schools. So even though we're not in those schools on a permanent basis the way we used to be, we are now doing it in a new and different ways. And as with anything, you need to change with the times, you need to change with what the needs of the community are. And so right now, we volunteer in all these different ministries, and we minister to each other and to the people that we meet every day. We have an associate program where we gather with people for faith sharing and for sharing at that very deep level. So we grow and change as the times change and as God calls us to those changes.
For sure. And the sisters provide such a beautiful ministry all across our diocese in so many different ways, right?
Yes.
So you have sort of also an administrative role with the Sisters of St. Joseph. And you had to take some studies, I believe, to really be knowledgeable in this position. So can you tell us a little bit about your role in the administration of the Sisters of St. Joseph?
Sure. So I attended Laurentian University and I received an honors Bachelor of Business Administration. And so my role right now is as general treasurer. And as such, I oversee the finances of the congregation, reporting to our leadership team, which consists of our general superior and counselors. And so I oversee the property of the Mother House, the finances of our sisters. And of course, we have sisters in Sault Ste. Marie, we have sisters in Sudbury, we have sisters in North Bay, we have a sister in Winnipeg. So it's overseeing all those different places and the finances of those. The other thing is because we own our property in common. I also oversee our fleet of cars and our houses, and so it's overseeing all the financial matters of the congregation, making sure that we serve and we have funds for our ministries and for the care of the sisters.
Now I know it's a different situation because COVID-19 has changed sort of our reality. But for people who don't know, like the Mother House in North Bay, like are people welcome outside of COVID times when restrictions relax to tour the Mother House or to visit, to see that place? Because it's stunning, it's beautiful, and the chapel there is just amazing. So are people allowed to visit when the times are different?
So we absolutely want to be open to visitors. It's just that we ask you to come to our switchboard and sign in, because then we can find a sister to give you a tour. If you could call ahead, it's even better. You're more than welcome. We have two beautiful chapels, one that overlooks the lake. It's called the Holy Family Chapel. So we're happy to give tours as long as you call ahead so that we can make sure that there's a sister available to provide you with that tour. The Mother, I've been living here for a few years and there's still nooks and crannies that I don't even know. So it's a large space to be aware of. And so we don't want you just to tour around. And we also have places that are private to our sisters, their living quarters. And so we just want to honor all those different pieces. But absolutely, if you'd like to come for a visit, call our switchboard and we'll see what we can arrange.
What would you say to a young woman who's feeling God calling them to ministry, maybe with the Sisters of St. Joseph, maybe with another religious order, or maybe just deepening their faith? What would you say to these young women who are feeling God calling them to something more in their life?
So my first thing is, listen to where God is calling you, because God will never lead you astray and God will be with you on that whole journey. So it's important for you to really just pay attention to what is the deepest desire of my heart that God is calling me to. The other thing I would suggest for sure is to speak with a spiritual director, because the spiritual director can take you to a deep, deep level that you wouldn't normally go if we live too much in our heads. With a spiritual director, you go to the heart, you go to where God is calling you at the deepest core of you. And so that is an important piece, because that spiritual director can help you with the discernment of saying, is God calling me to religious life? Is God calling me to ministry in a very different way? So those are very important pieces. And, for me, I spoke with sisters, I spoke with my family. I made those relationships essential to me, and so that's how I think you should always proceed, is to always go to that deep, deep heart longing.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. In for my whole life, the Sisters of Saint Joseph, it taught me in kindergarten, and we're always involved in the parish community. I know lots of sisters that sort of were role models of faith for me growing up too, and they're everywhere, just sort of involved in so many ministries. The joy that comes from them too is really nice to see.
Yes.
So, God bless the Sister of St. Joseph. And we didn't even touch on the prayer ministry that they offer.
That's right.
So many people, they offer such great prayer to so many in our community. So thank you for joining us today. God bless you in your ministry. And we'll continue to keep the Sisters of St. Joseph in our prayers.
Thank you. And please go to our website at c.s.j.ssm.ca, because often on there's the calendar, because we do have different events. Of course, not now, but we do have different events that take place, and we would welcome you to be part of those events. So please, and call if you have a question, by all means. Thank you very much, Father Daniele.
Yeah, thank you, Sister. Yeah. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Called to Serve. The Mother House is always welcoming people. Check out their website at c.s.j.ssm.ca and continue to pray for the Sisters of St. Joseph. We will see you next time on our next episode of Called to Serve.